Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Alka Dhameja from the Faculty of Public Administration, School of Social Sciences. With me is my colleague, Dr. Uma Meduri from the School of Social Sciences, and we are going to talk about mitigating disasters. Earlier, we have spoken about the meaning and concept of disasters, the different dimensions of mitigating disasters, and the very concept of mitigation, the different types of mitigation, and the guiding principles of mitigation. Now we are going to focus on the developments of mitigating disasters. We're going to take up various case studies which talk about the role of community participation and the relevance of participation in disaster mitigation. We're also going to focus on the problem areas, why mitigation actually fails, and then the ways of improving mitigation. But before we start today's discussion, let us first try to recap what we've already discussed on disaster mitigation. As we all know, disaster mitigation, as the very word reflects, means to lessen the impact, the severity, the intensity of disasters. Disasters normally have very, very negative consequences on the society, polity, and economy. Mitigation is the attempt to lessen this negative impact. We cannot totally rule out the negative consequences of disasters, because disasters, as the name says, is a calamity. They are bound to have very, very bad effects on the system. So if we have a proper mitigation plan in place, we can sort of lessen this negative impact of disasters to a great extent. By mitigation, we would mean prevention, protection, and preparedness for disasters. It involves all these things. And mitigation, like earlier we have mentioned, is not a stage which precedes the disaster response stage in disaster management cycle. It is a stage which is a part of every phase of disaster management cycle, whether it is preparedness, whether it is response, whether it is rehabilitation, recovery. Mitigation actually has to be done throughout the disaster management cycle on a continuous basis. Now, disaster mitigation can be of two types, a formal type and non-formal type. By formal, we would mean the rules and regulations, the government programs, the incentive schemes that the government has for its people to mitigate disasters, then the institutional setup to mitigate disasters, an effective warning system, and of course a proper human resource management system, which includes training and education. As we've already dealt with it earlier, we will not go into it in detail. By non-formal mitigation, we would say training and education programs which are non-formal, in the sense which are done through folklore, and non-formal means by theatre, plays, which people who are not literate can follow. So non-formal non-formal stream would also include capacity building of people's participation, which we are going to focus on in this session today. People's participation is a very, very effective non-formal means of mitigating disasters. In fact, they are the lifeline of disaster mitigation, and everything depends on the people. If people are just the recipients, and that too passive recipients of disaster management program, very few disaster mitigation programs can succeed. As far as the dimensions of disaster mitigation are concerned, we can have economic and physical dimensions of disaster mitigation, which would include, again, all the rules and regulations and government programs and, creation of job opportunities and infrastructure and all that. Then comes the social mitigation, disaster mitigation, which would include the social processes and the construction of Anganwadis, daycare centers, measures for the vulnerable groups in order to build the social capacities of the weaker and less privileged sections of the society. And then there's a psychological mitigation, which would include steps which would keep in mind the mindset of the victims as well as the helpers. Because in disaster mitigation, even the helpers go through a lot of psychological trauma while helping out the victims. So these three dimensions are very important. And as far as the guiding principles are concerned, disaster mitigation is a great opportunity for development, because it is a means of development. It initiates processes of development into the economy. Then prioritization is a very important disaster mitigation principle, because in a disaster mitigation program, we have to see that the vulnerable sections, the women, the old, the children are given more priority than the others. There are people all people are affected in disasters, but the vulnerable people, the poor people are affected more. So these are the people who should be given more emphasis and more attention. Then monitoring and evaluation is a very, very important guiding principle of mitigation. It should be continuous and should go on right from the very beginning till the end, so that we know where we are going wrong and how we can, improve things. Then comes institutionalization, which would mean that whatever we are discussing today, whatever has gone into disaster mitigation, whatever steps that the government, NGOs, international organizations take in the area of disaster mitigation have to be institutionalized, because unless we institutionalize things, that is, unless we have institutions which will follow up these steps, institutions which would monitor the disaster mitigation step, institutions which reach to the grassroots level, institutions like schools, hospitals, disaster mitigation institutes, training institutions, and education institutions, and research institutions, and science and technology institutions working in the area of disaster mitigation. These are the institutions which have to be developed and networked in a way that disaster mitigation becomes a reality. And we know a lot about disaster mitigation. At a theoretical plane, a lot of people talk about it, but when it comes to ground realities, things just go disarray when a disaster strikes. We will be talking about the problem areas today in our session. But before my colleague Uma Meduri actually takes up the case studies, I would just like to tell you about the developments actually which are taking place in the area of disaster mitigation. A lot of things are being done at the international level, as well as the respective countries level, national, micro levels, village level, community level. So when you say international mitigation strategies, I'm reminded of lots of summits and conferences, consortiums, forums, which are there in place and doing a lot of work in the area of disaster mitigation. For instance, we, as you all know, 1990 to 2000 was the International Decade for Natural Disaster Reduction, and it has done a lot of work in the area of disaster mitigation. In fact, most of the work in the area of disaster mitigation was done between the year 1990 to 2000, and what we are doing now is a follow-up of the International Decade of Natural Disaster Reduction. The only problem was that this decade only emphasized on natural disasters, and other disasters like man-made disasters were kept out of the purview. Then again, when later on the International Strategy for Disaster Risk Reduction took up disasters, man-made as well as natural, as a disaster risk reduction or mitigation strategy, and is still continuing with its programs on disaster mitigation. In between, we've had Earth Summit in 1992 in Brazil. It talked about how we are not in harmony with nature, how we are messing up with the environment, and how environmental consequences are impacting on the system and are leading to disasters. This was a very, very important summit, and the Agenda 21 of the Earth Summit actually talked about disaster mitigation and its interlinkages with the environment. Then later on, the Yokohama Strategy in 1994 was a very important midterm review of the International Decade of Natural Disaster Reduction. It laid emphasis on prevention, on proactive measures rather than response measures. It talked about the role of stakeholders and how we can network the stakeholders. By stakeholders, I mean the people who are involved in disaster management, like the community, like the government, like the NGOs, like the international organization, like the self-help groups, and various other organizations, formal as well as informal. So these are the stakeholders, and they have to be networked so that one knows what the other is doing, and they can work in a cooperative and coordinated manner. Then there has been a Provention Consortium in 2000, which also talked about prevention, disaster mitigation, mitigation, the interlinkages between disaster management and development, the role of the people and the role of the public policy, and how governments can be involved in disaster mitigation. Then we've had the Freiburg Forum again in 2000 in Switzerland. This was convened by the United Nations Office of Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, and it also brought together all the Commonwealth of Nation countries, European countries, and various international and national agencies so that they can cooperate in the field of disaster mitigation. Then we've had a hemispheric conference in 2001, which again talked about all these things that I've just mentioned. And then we've had lots of environment treaties, you know, like because now we realize that environment protection is a very, very important aspect of disaster mitigation. We've earlier discussed all these basic facets of disaster mitigation and what all it includes. So environment protection and sustainable development is one of the very, very important aspects of disaster mitigation. So all these environmental conferences like the Kyoto Protocol, the Montreal Protocol, the Hyogo Conference. Hyogo Conference in 2005 specifically talks about building resilience of the communities for disaster mitigation. Then we've had lots of treaties which talk about biodiversity, prevention of protection of environment and biodiversity, protection of desertification, and movement of hazardous waste from one nation to the other. These treaties are very important, and lots of nations are a part of this treaty. India is also a part of the Kyoto Protocol and many other environmental treaties at the international levels. It helps because it gives us a framework for analysis and parameters to see whether environmental protection is going on in the country or not, and how we can improve the things. Whereas in India, my colleague will also talk about some developments which we are doing in India at the disaster mitigation level. But just to mention a few, I would say that training is a very important area, and lots of training institutions, almost 29 training institutions in India have separate programs for disaster management. The All India Services training curricula now includes a subject on disaster management and mitigation. Then NCERT now has disaster management as part of its syllabus for the school children. NCERT is now developing a module for training the trainers, the teachers on disaster management and school safety. And then we have lots of communities development programs at the village level. The self-help groups are coming up. And you know, we are networking, NGOs are networking. Vasudeva is a network which is of NGOs which is working in the area of disaster mitigation. So there are lots of developments in the field of science and technology also. We have developed a lot. We have remote sensing, we have a geographical information system in place. We are taking recourse to aerial photography, and we have now a total multiple internet access system to monitor sea waves, and we use a cellular modem, and it's a very advanced technology. We have sort of now have it in place after the tsunami aftermath. And other developments are also taking place in the field of modern technology. We are also using traditional technologies like ham radios and other grassroots networks, which are very important when other means of communication fail in the disaster aftermath. So these are the various mitigation developments that are going on, plus the measures that I have mentioned earlier in the form of incentives and institution building, capacity building, and government programs. And all these things are actually working towards disaster mitigation. In the course of our discussion, it will become more clear the problems that we are facing and how we can improve. But before we actually go on to the problem areas, I think it would be better if my colleague explains to you some developments in India which are going on, and some case studies which have been successful and from which we can learn some lessons.
Thank you, Alka. Alka has quite extensively, she touched upon all the major developments taking place in the area of disaster mitigation. As she has rightly said, disasters provide unique opportunities to experiment with various mitigation measures. Like we have now, like she was also mentioning about institutionalizing all these activities. So now, I think a good beginning has been made by the Government of India. Now we have the National Disaster Management Act, which was passed in 2005. It clearly lays down the structure structure or the organizational setup that needs to be instituted at the central or the national level, state, and coming down to the district level, where at the district level the district collector is supposed to be the key disaster manager. So I think this one way is a very important measure which looks into a holistic approach towards mitigating disasters. As Alka had rightly said, mitigation is an interdisciplinary, or we can say it has several interrelated components. So mitigation activities has to be built into the disaster planning, preparedness, recovery, reconstruction and rehabilitation, because the ultimate aim of mitigation is to reduce the effects of the disasters. No doubt disasters, if they have to occur, they have to occur, but the only thing is, through taking certain mitigation measures, the intensity or the repercussions of the disasters on the people, livestock, physical infrastructure, it can be lessened. So this is a very multifaceted activity which involves the government, non-government organizations, community-based organizations, the community as such. Like Alka was mentioning about the Hyogo conference, which emphasized on the strengthening the resilience of the communities. This brings about a very important aspect when we talk of mitigation, that it's ultimately the communities which face the wrath of the disasters. So their capacities and capabilities have to be strengthened. So I think with the passing of this National Disaster Management Act, and then clear specification of the roles and responsibilities, especially at the grassroots level where we have the Panchayati Raj functionaries, I think the entire efforts towards the mitigating disasters in times to come will really yield some results. Like in India, we had severe disasters. Like, in 1977, that was the first disaster which happened in Andhra Pradesh. So the state of Andhra Pradesh really learned some lessons when they handled this disaster, and they took some important mitigation measures. So this, the cyclone shelters, which were not before, like the government had embarked upon a big project in setting up or constructing the cyclone shelters. Now there are about 1,200 cyclone shelters along the coastline of Andhra Pradesh. And one more important thing which Alka was referring to is the HAM, like the National Institute of Amateur Radio, which is set up in Hyderabad, that has played a key role in equipping or then training the Panchayati Raj functionaries along the coastal areas. Now each Panchayati Raj, each Panchayat now has a ham radio, and time to time that is being tested so that the warnings are disseminated to the people. So warning is a very important mitigation measure, so that now whenever a disaster, there is a threat of, because the entire coastline of Andhra Pradesh has this frequent disaster threats of cyclone or any flood. So we find that now the situation has really improved. So immediately a warning is given, the district collector makes the arrangements, and then the people are evacuated to the cyclone shelters. And there are many NGOs which have trained people how to act, and the constitution of disaster mitigation committees and disaster task forces. And some of the NGOs, there is an NGO called National Disaster Mitigation Efforts, that is an NGO which has even trained children how to respond and immediately when there is a warning of disaster, and how to provide first aid, and also undertake even search and rescue operations. And they also are involved with the community when any reconstruction activity are taken. So this entire thing of mitigation, preparedness, there is a lot of awareness being inculcated amongst the community. Like even the government of India has now a disaster risk mitigation program, and under this various initiatives are being taken up. Like for example, in the state of Assam, in Lahori Ghat block in Moregaon district in Assam, there that is a place which is being frequented by floods. So the local residents have formed a disaster management committee. They realized that the embankments, or at certain places the banks, have to be raised. They took initiative over this, approached the local government, and they contributed some land towards this, even labor, and with the result they could construct that. And in addition, to give some livelihood options during the non-flood time, they even had set up a community fisheries pond, which has given livelihood to the people living in that area. Like in addition, like some of the NGOs really are, as I was mentioning before, are playing a very important role in strengthening the capacities of the people, make them understand what mitigation is, and then make efforts towards strengthening their resilience. Like for example, the Churches Auxiliary for Social Action, CASA, like in Ganjam district, in one of the villages, they have trained, to begin with in the year 1990s, they have started the training in the disaster mitigation. Like they train them on the various aspects of what actually is mitigation, what measures should be taken up, even in reconstruction, rehabilitation, income generating activities, and all these they give training. And once these people who are trained, the volunteers, they go back to the villages, they form various committees and then enable the villagers know about this mitigation. And this program actually has got a lot of attention and it has become very popular. So all this indicates that there is motivation on the part of the community to learn about mitigation and also initiate certain measures. Only thing is they need to be given a proper direction. So the motivation and the desire to learn certain things, it is there on the community, but it has to be channelized in this. Only thing is the organizations or the CBOs or the NGOs which are helping them need to act as a catalyst in taking up these programs. Like one of the case studies which I would like to mention about, which is very popular in Sri Lanka, like they have the Sri Lanka in some of the areas, they are drought prone. So they have started what is called as a Setu or a collective. There the people are well aware that as the drought approaches, there is going to be shortage of food grains. So what they do is about 5 to 6 months prior to the drought approaching season, they keep aside a certain part of their consumption of rice and they constitute a community grain fund, which comes of use when actually the drought approaches. And this Setu or collective, this rice Setu has been extended to other activities where women are playing a very playing an important role. They even contribute some amount of cash and they constitute a fund, and the money which is collected from this is used for some income generating activities. Even in India also, in Orissa, after the super cyclone, these self-help groups really played a key important role, and they started various activities like poultry raising and even cottage or small scale industries, handicrafts and things like that. So this mitigation is a very important, interesting area, and it actually gives an opportunity to experiment with various innovative measures. And like when we talk about the mitigation, like I would like to ask Alka, like what will be the, like, are there any challenges which this disaster mitigation poses?
Yeah, like Uma has already spoken about different cases, one from Sri Lanka, then Assam, and as the role of self-help groups and community in these case studies. But the thing is that it is very nice to know that people are very motivated, and even the NGOs and other agencies that are working in these areas are motivated to help them, and they have formed a kind of a corpus to actually help each other, corpus of food bank, and in some places even water bank. These grain banks, food banks are also playing a very important role. Microfinance is very popular in Bangladesh, and women Mahila Mandals are playing very important role in various areas. The problem is that we know that there have been success stories, we know people have been participating, but somewhere things are not right. We haven't been able to learn our lessons from these scattered case studies. I would like to call them scattered because there is no research work which actually weaves them together. There is no epistemological basis to build on as far as disaster mitigation is concerned. Every other phase of disaster management cycle is concerned. Lots of experts from different areas, since it is a multidisciplinary subject, lot of experts from different areas like geography, technology, social sciences, anthropology, they all come, even sociology and other people working at the grassroots level, they all come together, talk about various things and talk about the studies they've done, talk about the field experiences they've shared, but there is absolutely nothing which has woven this together. So in the absence of an epistemological basis in the area of disaster mitigation, we cannot conclude anything. We cannot say we are going wrong and how we can improve things. We all know, the experts in the area know, the government knows, the NGOs knows, we as students and teachers in disaster management also know a few things, but we cannot sort of build a knowledge base which is really, really required in the area of disaster mitigation. So I would just say that the first challenge to me is building an epistemological basis in disaster mitigation. Unless we have that, unless we have really good books to fall back on, we don't have them in India. They might be there in other countries and people of those countries must be using them, but we need contextual books, the books which can help us, the readings, articles and other write-ups which can help us, which we can draw from and which we can build on. So this is the biggest challenge I feel in the area of disaster mitigation. Another challenge which flows from what my colleague Uma Meduri was saying is the challenge of community participation. Though we know that these case studies talk about very, very motivated communities, but we also know about communities which just do not participate in the disaster aftermath. They don't want to do anything in the area of disaster mitigation. Recently in Tamil Nadu, in post-tsunami phase, the government had started a program with the help of an international NGO to support the fishermen, and for that the minimum requirement was that loans were to be sanctioned and fishermen were supposed to go to the banks and get their loan sanctioned, and this much also they couldn't do, and they just reverted to an NGO. They went to the NGO and asked for NGO help. It is all right for instance NGOs are there to help, but unless they make their own initiative, unless they do something to in the program to help themselves, total external dependence will not work. So there are many cases where people have really not been contributing to that extent. One of the other challenges which I can infer from this is that there is a lack of awareness, total lack of awareness on mitigation. There are many people who do not even know that it just takes 5% to 10% of the total cost of the house to retrofit it. So they won't retrofit it. They would think that the house is not good, it is maybe earthquake prone, and they will just, you know, sit back and wait for a disaster, or after the disaster go for a totally new constructed houses given by some NGO or an international organization. So the basic levels of awareness are very low. Many people do not take recourse to little things like Uma mentioned, that there you can have a grain bank, you can have a water bank also, you can save a few essentials for the rainy days, that is for the disasters. So the little things, they will not make efforts. For them, it is true that India is a very poor country. Most of the people are illiterate, and they really do not know where to go to. For them, making the two ends meet in normal conditions is also so difficult. So when a disaster strikes, mitigating it is very difficult, and they cannot have these mitigating measures continuously with them to prepare themselves for the future, because they don't have the means. So the means could be provided from external agencies, but they could be taught, they could be told, they could be informed, their awareness levels could be raised so that they can learn to help themselves. Many areas we have seen that disaster task forces have come up, where, you know, villagers now have their own resources, they have their own boats, they have their own ropes, they have their own essential. They know when the floods come what they have to do. But it is not widespread. It is not a uniform phenomenon. It has to be nicely disseminated everywhere through knowledge networks, through books, through government programs. And over here, the role of the media is also very important. It plays a very relevant role in disaster mitigation, and it is the biggest challenge. Normally, we see that media has a tendency to sensationalize things. In a disaster aftermath, it would just tell you how much has broken down, how much devastation has taken place, how many deaths are there, how many people have lost their near and dear ones. But it won't tell you anything about the mitigative measures. What happens once the life comes back to normalcy, how people are coping with it, because these are very, very important things, because we just lose interest after the disaster aftermath. We do not know what is now happening in post-tsunami hit areas. We do not have any idea about the Muzaffarabad earthquake at all. No newspaper talks about it. We don't know what kind of reconstruction, rehabilitation work is going on there. So instead of blaming the audience that the readers do not want to know, readers are only interested in, sensational news, media should try to sustain the interest of the readers in the entire process of disaster management cycle, because unless they do that, we wouldn't know what is happening, and if we do not know, we cannot improve upon things. So this is also a challenge. Media has to be sensitized, and media's role has to be made very relevant. And another thing is political compulsions. What what happens is, if an assembly election is round the corner, the politicians would do everything, would make lots of promises towards disaster mitigation, but won't do much if there is no election in the around the corner. So disasters are a very nice way of deriving political mileage also. They will just wait for the disasters and announce SOPs only when disaster occurs. So these are certain political compulsions, and the leadership of the country should realize that disasters is something they have to plan for all through the year. They don't have to actually wait for a disaster to occur. So preparedness and mitigation towards disaster management is the key, rather than response and rehabilitation, which are more costly than disaster mitigation. Another challenge would be financial constraints, which are there always. So to meet that, we have a national calamity fund, and we have a Prime Minister's relief fund also. We have a national calamity contingency fund. We have lots of member of parliament district area programs also, MPLADS, district schemes, where almost 2 crores are sanctioned for development, and we have lots of insurance schemes also. But the thing is that these resources are not used for mitigation. They are generally used for aftermath, and that too not properly. So this is also a challenge. And then one of the biggest challenges not linking mitigation with their development, because now the key is LRRD continuum, that is linking relief and rehabilitation with development. So by this we can say that even mitigation has to be linked with development. Unless we realize that a proper development plan, socio-economic planning, development planning is in place, we cannot have a disaster management plan, because disasters are also calamities which are not created by nature's wrath always. They are actually not random acts which hit us once in a blue moon. They are always there. Recently, what happened in Chennai floods is an example of total lack of urban planning, haphazard land use planning in metropolitan cities. So unless we actually have proper development policies in place, disasters would increase in severity, and we would find it all the more difficult to mitigate disasters. Even small things like what happened in Meerut, in the Meerut fire recently, we realize how unaware the people are and how insensitive the authorities are. They would just have one exit and one entrance for a trade fair, and with all the synthetic tents, even they did not take any no objection certificates, and people were just not bothered. They just entered and they were just having a nice time. They didn't realize how catastrophic it can be. So I think we have to also open our eyes and realize that disaster can happen anytime, right here in the studio also. We have to be always vigilant and prepared, always informed, and we should just get out of this dependency syndrome and learn to help ourselves. I think these are the ways, and I think Uma would like to talk about a few more case studies, and we can talk about various ways of improving disaster mitigation in India.
Like as Alka has rightly said, that community should not be dependent on any external support, or some sort of a push is needed for them to take up certain activities. But after that, even that agency or any NGO which has helped the community should see that it moves out of the picture, and then so that the resilience or the self-reliance of the community increases. Like for example, an effort made by Gram Vikas, an NGO in village Samepalli in Ganjam district in Orissa. Like what they did was, suddenly you tell people that you take some mitigation measures to face the disasters, that is not going to give them the results, or people are generally not convinced. What they did was, that was of course an NGO of a long standing, and since 1990s they tried to make the community aware about the clean drinking water and sanitation. So this was the biggest project this NGO had taken up in that village. It is called Water Sanitation Vatsan Project, and they tried to tell them that many of the health problems they are facing, skin problems, they all are due to unclean or unsafe water. So what they tried to tell the people is to construct a water tank where they can get water from the safe supply, and then that in turn comes into their homes. So this was the first step which they had taken in that village. And another problem which the people were, especially the women, were facing in that village was alcoholism, where the men were really spending away most part of their money on consumption of alcohol. So this NGO tried to make the people, women, aware of the negative effects of this, and it is quite commendable that the women really took certain major stances. Like they said that they are not going to fetch water for their husbands who were resorting to alcoholism. They are not going to cook for them. And this actually, over a period, of course it took about 2 years, but then it paid results, that men really realized the negative effects of alcoholism, and a majority of them had given up. So this was like through taking up a water and an environment project, they tried to make the people aware about this other social evils also. And later, since this particular village was only about 5 kilometers from the coastal belt of Orissa, this NGO tried to make the people aware that there is a need to rebuild their homes. It's okay that they are getting good water, but then that is of no use until they try to reconstruct their thatched roofs. So what they did was they arranged loans from the Housing Development Corporation, and about 10,000 rupees was given even by this Gram Vikas, and 38% of the entire cost was contributed by the community in the form of labor. Even women and grown-up children also contributed in building up their homes. So it was this experiment really proved good, that when the super cyclone had hit this village in 1999, the nearby villages were affected, especially the houses and all were affected, but these houses which they had built with the help of Gram Vikas, they were not affected, and the people could start their livelihood and then regain their lives. So this tells us that the NGO really has to, whichever NGO is working with the community, has to make the community convince them about the environmental things or other things which are of prime importance to them, and then bring about certain measures to face the disasters. Then one more thing is, even the traditional wisdom and the traditional practices also play a very key role. One of the NGOs, Deccan Development Society, had undertaken a project in Zahirabad region in Andhra Pradesh, which is really drought prone, and there were many suicide cases also in this village, where the people had invested in this cash rich crops and then they really lost. So what these people did was, they tried to form women's cooperatives and tried to generate additional livelihood programs in this. And one more thing was, this society realized that there were some rare varieties of rice and millet seeds which need to be preserved. So they started this program of starting the community gene seed bank. So they used to have fairs twice in a year, and then ask the villagers to bring and demonstrate or exhibit these rare varieties of seeds. And this actually prompted many of the rich farmers also to come look at this and then buy some of these. So with the result, their livelihood, many of them got employment, and they also, with the money they got it, they tried to procure some land which was lying vacant in this, and tried to grow some vegetables. So this has been some of the thing where people were really convinced, they were very happy that some of their traditional practices, they really felt that these seeds would really yield results, but only thing is they did not have the proper direction as to how to put this. So this is one. And one more, the last thing is the Gujarat earthquake. Like in one of the villages, Patanka, which had about 250 households, they, with the help of an NGO called SEED, Sustainable Ecological Environmental Development Society, they tried to build very cheap houses, but then which are disaster prone. So in this also, the experiment which SEEDS did was, they tried to train the local masons. So whenever the people feel that their livelihoods are not threatened, they are in the process gaining something, their skills are being improved, they really come forward and then take up this mitigation. They really actively participate in this mitigation efforts. So what I just tried to put forth is, mitigation, the community really feels involved. Only thing is, their livelihood should not be threatened, and they should form a part of it. And once the NGO or a CBO, whichever is working, at a certain point they should just get away and ensure that this activity gets sustainability in the long run.
Yeah, thank you, Uma. I think Uma has really lucidly put how community can help in disaster mitigation. She has also cited various cases of different types, where community has done so many things. It has even set up a gene bank, which is really very, illuminating, because if community can do all these kinds of things, and community has a lot of potential that needs to be tapped. And as she rightly mentioned, that they have to feel motivated, and they can feel motivated if they're satisfied that they are not threatened in any way, and the NGOs are there to help, and they are helping them to help themselves, and they can build better futures for themselves if they cooperate and their livelihood remains stable. So their community has to be really involved by giving them the right information and by giving them a sense of security. And once they have, I think community can play a very important role. So we are reaching the end of the session, and I can only say that the ways of improving mitigations are many, and the best way to improve mitigation is building community resilience, which was the central focus of our discussion. Traditional wisdom, like Uma pointed out, is a very, very crucial point. We are just forgetting our traditional wisdom. We are forgetting the water conservation methods that Rajasthan used to follow in terms of raparts and kundis and palyals of Kerala. We are forgetting the small earthquake resistant techniques that, like base isolation and all these techniques, and the Quencha households of Peru, and even Sumers of Rajasthan, the Kotis and Chaukhats of Rajasthan. They've all been very, very earthquake resistant, and we are just forgetting how we lived in harmony with nature. So environment protection, sustainable development, looking for alternative livelihoods, living in harmony with nature, building communities, building capacities of the communities, building capacities of the institutions, having a new role for the media, going for a good development plan which has disaster management as an integral part of it, going for nice land use urban planning, not wasting resources, going for financially, sensible approach towards disaster management. I think these are various approaches, different ways of improving disaster mitigation. And another thing, only to recapitulate, I would say that we have to link up everything with development. Unless we link up disaster mitigation with development, we're going to have more disasters in the futures on an almost a monthly basis. We've seen so many disasters in the past which have not actually been caused by nature. Tsunami was caused because of natural reasons, but why were we hit so badly? Because we had lost track of our mangroves. Our dikes were not in place. We had no proper facility for regeneration of fisheries. Our coasts were, hotels were built right into the coastline. So we had forgotten all that. That is the reason we were hit so badly. So disasters are there. Disasters can be caused through natural and man-made resources. The only way to mitigate disasters is to realize that we have to have a balanced, right-based, vulnerable, section-prone approach towards disaster, so that the less privileged get some advantages, so that a community, and of course with a proper awareness, training and education program, so that we know what has to be done at the right time. The external dependency on all the NGOs and international bodies have to go, plus the organizations like the Intermediate Technology Group, Asian Development Disaster Preparedness Center. All these organizations have to be networked so that everybody can gain something from their knowledge and experience. We have to build a knowledge base through this, and I think it's a long way to go, but these measures are not very difficult to adapt and adopt. So we can do that, and I think with the right approach, with the right perspective, we can do that. And I would like to thank Uma for giving us an insight into so many cases and so many studies on community resilience. I think that is the key to disaster mitigation. Thank you.